Hi, my name is Michael Burris, and I'm the CEO of the South Carolina Policy Council. Thank you so much for tuning in to our 2026 candidate interview series. I would like to thank our donors and my staff for their contributions in making all of this possible. What you are going to see are candidates from both parties running for statewide office in the 2026 cycle share their platforms with you, our viewers. Our interviews will be based off of the South Carolina Policy Council's core values of limited government, free markets, and individual liberty. We appreciate you watching, and we hope you enjoy. Welcome to the South Carolina Policy Council's 2026 Candidate Interview Series. My name is Michael Burris, and I'm the CEO of the South Carolina Policy Council. I'm joined today by our Research Director, Sam Aaron, and Democratic candidate for Governor, Mullins McLeod. Mullins, thanks for being with us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, guys.
Anytime. Well, we're going to jump into some questions here, and we're going to start off with a personal question. Why are you running for governor?
So I'm running for governor to return the power in this state to its rightful owners, which is we the people. Something that people don't really realize when they get up every day and go to work is that we're under attack, okay? We're under attack, and we're under attack by money and greed. And the politicians in Columbia have allowed money and greed to purchase our public policy. And so now what's happening in Columbia is the will of the people is not being served. It's the desires of these large for-profits. And now we're more at risk than ever because of Citizens United, which is 2010 Supreme Court decision, which allows basically bribery because dark money can spend unlimited amounts of money without any disclosure of where the money comes from, as long as they don't coordinate with a campaign. And it's a problem, and it's causing direct economic harm to we the people. And the thing about corruption is it doesn't discriminate. It's bipartisan. It doesn't know geographic limits. And it's affecting all of us. And I can go through chapter and verse and explain how it's causing direct economic harm. And that's why I'm running, to return the people to power of South Carolina and to protect them from this cancer of corruption that's causing direct economic harm every single day.
Thank you. Sam?
Yeah, so we're going to kind of get into the taxes and spending section here. So this first question is just about the general budget, specifically the general fund, which is tax revenue that we spend. Over the past 25 years, we've increased the general fund every single year substantially, except for one COVID-induced pause. What would you do to kind of address this constant increasing in spending? Do you think that's all right, or do you think we should move in a different direction?
Yeah, I think that today's political establishment in Columbia act like 1970s Democrats. They've never seen a dollar they don't want to spend. The size of government has increased every year, I think, over the last 30 years. The truth of the matter is the political establishment in Columbia has committed the greatest con in American political history, and this is how they've done it. If you go back and look at every election cycle, they promise us tax relief. They promise us to take this tax burden off our backs, but yet they fail to do so. Now, in the real world, where I've been training to do this job for the last 25 years, that's called corruption. But in Columbia, it's just business as usual. And the reason why they've been able to get away with it, I believe, is because in essence, the establishment thinks as long as they put an R by their name, they'll never be held accountable for any of these decisions. And I think that's going to change. And I think this is an election cycle that it does change, because you can't sell people a fake bill of goods for 30 years and expect to get away with it. At some point, it catches up with you. I believe this election cycle is when it catches up with them.
Yeah, I totally hear you. I think that spending too, it really aligns with that tax reform like you alluded to. So, in a state that does have a somewhat weaker executive branch, how would you influence the legislature to act on tax reform and really carry out tax cuts?
One is the truth. And at least in my lifetime, I'm not aware of anybody coming from the private sector and being willing to really speak truth to power, that actually knows what they're talking about, okay? There's one rule in my campaign: nobody, and I mean nobody, gets to tell me what to say. Like nobody. It's got to come from here. And there's a reason, because that's what voters deserve. They deserve to know who I am, how I see the world, and what I believe in. So on tax reform, we are taxed at an alarming rate compared to other southern states, okay? The reason why they promise us tax relief and never give it to us is because they can't afford to give us a tax relief, because these large for-profits are getting a free ride. If you look at the numbers, for every dollar that we the people pay into the system, these large for-profits are paying a dime. I call it the dollar and a dime. That's wrong. That's not fair. You follow me? And that has to change. We have to make the tax burden in the state more equitable and more fair. And the way is to take this burden off of we the people's back and require these for-profits just to pay their share. Because if you think about it, large corporations are better equipped to pass off the cost of a tax, whereas people who get up every day to go to work have no ability to pass off an unfair tax. That's an inequity that they can't recover from. You follow me? And I believe, now I know I'll be attacked during the campaign that, oh, he's bad for business, bad for business. Let me tell you, no. What is good for people is good for business. You follow me?
Sure.
It's real simple. The more money people have in their pockets, the more they can spend in the economy, the better business does. I'm very pro-business. I'm just not for basically giving these large for-profits a free ride, giving them everything they want and desire for a dime while we pay $1 and don't get the things we've already bought and paid for. That's the inequity that just got to stop.
So would you support like a full elimination of the state income tax?
As soon as we can afford to do it, absolutely.
Okay.
I would like to tell you now, all the establishment candidates are saying go to zero, right? I don't know if we can. Okay, I don't know if we can afford that. Absolutely would be my goal. Okay, but I don't want to sell people on something that I know I can't deliver. I'm a servant leader. Okay, I'm not a politician. I don't say things just to get elected. We've got $45 billion coming in every year. Okay, about a third of that is from income tax, sales and use, and our corporate tax. And I don't know if the numbers work to go to zero tomorrow, but that absolutely is the goal. And that is what we need to be working towards. But to get there, we've got to shift the burden from people who get up and go to work every day to these large for-profits who've gotten a free ride. Once we shift the burden, then we can get there, because that's the way it should be.
Yeah, okay. I hear you on that. I also think sometimes whenever you hear other states talk about tax reform, what they're actually talking about is shifting the burden, right? And just moving it around. And when you shift that burden, occasionally how that ends up coming back to people is, people receive less money in their paychecks when you tax a corporation higher. I think that the spending side of the issue is clearly the issue, how you can address some tax reform. In doing our research and gathering questions for this, sure, we reached out to our supporters and asked them if they had any question. So this question comes from Alex in Greenville. South Carolina currently has a state law requiring all state agencies to follow zero-based budgeting principles annually when submitting their budget, and this means justifying previous expenses as well as increases or new spending requests. How would you enforce this? And just for a little context here, in practice, I know this from reviewing the documents myself, these agencies, they don't often justify the entirety of their budget. They just justify the new and the increase and don't justify the old. So then you never actually evaluate the existing program. So what would your administration look like in the governor's office overseeing this process?
Yeah, so, and that's a good question. So we've been told, right, that the executive branch is weak, okay, because the legislature passes the bills, they pass the budget. But I don't view it that way. I think the executive branch has plenty of power in South Carolina. One of the ways it can exert a lot of power is through the agencies. That's where the fraud, the waste, and the abuse is happening. So the money comes in, there's oversight and there's transparency on how we do the budget. It gets passed, it goes to the governor's desk, it's signed into law, and then the money gets distributed to the agencies. That's where the problem comes in. You follow me? But the governor appoints all the agency heads. And so the governor has a lot of ability and power to ensure that there's no fraud, waste, and abuse within the 18 agencies, I think it is, maybe it's 16, but across all the state agencies. Mm-hmm. And so in my research, I found two things. One is they're not really acting in a fiscally responsible manner. And two, there's basically no oversight into whether or not the money that goes out actually goes where it's supposed to go and whether it's used for what it's supposed to be used for. So there has to be not just oversight within the agency, but oversight once the tax dollar leaves the agency. Because we've gotten to a place in Columbia where, at least the way I think the system's being run is, the establishment thinks, okay, we tax this money and now it's our money. Now, I know you guys have heard politicians around Columbia say, we are awash in money. Well, that's the people's money. It's the public's money. Politicians don't own it. State government doesn't own it. State government should have a fiduciary duty to the people of South Carolina because it's their money. They're the ones that went to work. They're the ones that earned it. And so we have got to completely change the way we think about the public's money. And we have to treat the public's money better than we treat our own money, because we got to show respect for the people that went to work and earned that money. And so we don't waste it. We are financial stewards beyond a shadow of a doubt. In the real world, a fiduciary is, you can't, if I'm managing Michael's money, I can't pay myself a commission unless the value of Michael's account goes up. Well, not in state government. Our pension right now is underfunded by $26 billion. They have robbed the piggy bank, right? But people are still getting bonuses. It makes no sense. If you were in the real world, you would be fired. You would be sued. But state government's become so corrupt and so indoctrinated to this idea of this is our money, we can do with it what we want to. The people are being disserved, and it's got to stop.
That's right. I agree. And I think that, the spending just keeps increasing and increasing well above inflation and population growth in the state. I think what you touched on with waste, fraud, and abuse leads really nicely into Michael's next question.
So we're going to go into government efficiency and transparency as our next topic. So Mullins, the South Carolina has the Office of the State Auditor, the Office of the Inspector General, the Legislative Audit Council, and the House Government Efficiency and Legislative Oversight Committee. These are four distinct entities for government accountability. How would a Department of Governmental Efficiency differ from these entities? Now, the reason we bring that up is because, of course, there's a Senate bill on the table right now to create another agency, being DOGE, basically. Right. So we have these four currently established entities. We want to bring in another agency to basically make the government more efficient. How would you square that circle if governor?
That's what politicians do. They create all these agencies so nobody has ownership and control over solving the problem. What you have to do is have one agency whose sole responsibility is to DOGE South Carolina, to make sure that there is no fraud, waste, and abuse anywhere in the system. And you got to have it so it's centralized so that the people know who to look to figure out whether there's fraud, waste, and abuse, and somebody who can hold the line on it. Well, if you've got 5 people claiming to do the same job, 1, you're spending more money than you need to, and 2, you've got 5, so whose job is it?
Right.
You follow me? Consolidate it, put somebody in charge, and empower them to do the job that needs to be done. That's what I think.
Thank you. Sam?
Just like a business would do it.
Right.
You don't, every for-profit has a CFO, and what's his job? Watch the daggone money, period, in a story. And if the money goes missing, guess who loses his job? The CFO. Well, that's what we need in South Carolina. One guy or one girl, that's your job, make it happen.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, what you have is you have redundancies, and then it hurts the accountability process, right? The best example of this, because I believe the Legislative Audit Council does some really good reporting on this, and they recommend some really good reforms, but what does it matter if the legislature doesn't act on it, right? The best example is 2016, we have this wonderful DOT report, 350-something pages like this, right? And then nothing in the report gets enforced by the legislature or by the Department of Transportation. Why are we doing that? That doesn't make any sense.
So your question, redundancy, you just more artfully articulated what I was trying to say. But you're right. It's the redundancy, and there's no ownership. And that's a problem. The DOT is a whole nother problem. They increased our gas tax in 2012. They did it again in 2017. So from 2017 to 2023, they raised it 2 cents every year for a total of 12 cents, promised us better roads. But I just came from Charleston to Columbia, and we're still on 2 lanes. We had 2 lanes 50 years ago. It took me 2.5 hours to get here today. We don't have better roads today, but they've taken our money for the better roads. And that doesn't make any sense. See, there's no accountability from the government to the very people that they serve. And I want to change that. I think there's a real fiduciary duty the government has to the people of South Carolina. It's their money, not the government's. And you have responsibility to spend the money. Look at the lottery. We, the people of South Carolina, gave our state government the limited authorization to run this game for the primary purpose of reducing the cost of higher education. Has the cost of higher education gone down? No. You follow me? But yet, they have all this money. Now, I saw a report just the other day that the Lottery Commission got popped for having $152 million just laying around. I mean, the kid's trying to go to college and they're just sitting on $152 million. I also saw a report where the Lottery Commission got popped for selling scratch-off games despite the fact that the top prize had already been won. Now, you go ask anybody who goes in the filling station anywhere in South Carolina, hey, do you buy the scratch-off ticket for the money at the top or the winky button at the bottom? They're going to say the money at the top. And then you say, well, did you know that your government was selling you these tickets after that prize was won? He or she's going to be like, you got to be kidding me. No, corruption is a bottomless pit. And greed has no conscience. And that is one of the reasons why, one of the main reasons I'm running. It's just got to stop.
Sure, yeah. Getting kind of back into that, what we were talking about with redundancies, I did see on your platform you want to cut red tape. What kind of targets would you have in mind for that, and how would you go about that?
Well, one way, it's not just red tape. It's just, I believe, when you talk about fiscal responsibility and transparency, I believe in transparency till it hurts. Okay, they pass a law. The establishment passes a law known as FOIA to make us believe that they're transparent in the way that they do our work. Mm-hmm. But I know as a lawyer that there are two words in that law called executive session, which gives them the green light to go behind closed doors and do whatever they want to do, however they want to do it. So when I'm governor, one thing I want to do is get rid of those two words, executive session. The people's business must be done in the light. It must be done out in the open. And if you're uncomfortable doing the people's business out in the open, then that means you should not be doing that what you're trying to do, right? Transparency till it hurts. You want to restore trust and faith in government, you first have to be transparent. There are people all over South Carolina, think about them. Whether it be a school board meeting or whether it be a town hall meeting or a county council meeting, people go to try to get answers, and what happens? I make a motion, we go in executive session. They already have it all rigged. They already know who's going to say the second the motion, and then they vote and they're gone. And so the people are just sitting out there in silence while their work gets done, while their money gets spent. And that has to stop. So one thing like I want to do as governor is that every tax year, every dollar that's paid into the system must be spent on the public benefit, period. And if it is not spent on the public benefit, any unused dollar is returned to the taxpayer the same fiscal year. So they can use their change, for lack of a better word, to pay next year's tax bill. Instead, what this corrupt political establishment in Columbia is they've stockpiled almost $9 billion of our money. They're sitting on an almost $9 billion surplus. Now, there probably aren't any South Carolinians that know that. Think about that. They tax you, they tax you, they tax me, and then they sit on it. And what I'm afraid of, now this is a part that I've not nailed down yet, but I'm looking into, I don't think there's any transparency in how they spend that money. I think they're running a shadow government. Because see, what's happening is the money comes in, they budget it, there's processing, there's oversight, transparency, it gets signed, it goes to the agencies. Well, what's happening is the agencies are not spending all the money, and then it goes into this rainy day account from the research I've done. And we have no idea how that money's spent because the only transparency is on each year's budgeting process. And guys, that's some scary stuff. I mean, that's the dark side of the moon is what that is.
Yeah, I hear you. I think it reminds me a lot of our earmark process, the way that we go about spending for earmarks. And this is kind of our last section on this sort of transparency part. We just saw Governor McMaster, have this executive order that would, provide some stricter transparency requirements for, these earmark requests. If that was proposed in a bill and you were elected, would you sign it? And then what else would you do to kind of ensure that earmark process takes place out in the open and it's not, happening behind closed doors?
Yeah, you either have to ensure there's complete and total transparency with the earmarks, or you have to abolish earmarks altogether. You cannot allow earmarks to be done under the cover of darkness. You can't do it. And another thing that I don't like about the legislative session is, think about it this way. They're in session for 4 months out of the year, right? Well, they get lobbied for 8 months out of the year. Well, they get lobbied 12 months out of the year, right? But there's some real lobbying going on the 8 months out of the year. And that's the golf, that's the dinners, those are the boondoggles, right? Then they get in session and wham, 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 wham. Everything gets passed before the public even really has a chance to go, wait a minute, what happened? I'll give you a case example. The Rate Stabilization Act, I believe, is one of the biggest sellouts in South Carolina history. And this is why. What the establishment did was they, in essence, gave the for-profit power company a personal guarantee of profitability. If you look at the law, it allows them to increase our electric rates to ensure their profitability. That is so corrupt, it's hard to get your hands around. In the real world, the only personal guarantee I know of is you go to the bank and they make you sign in blood your personal guarantee. And God forbid, if you don't pay all your bills, they come and take everything out of your house, your pots and pans included. You follow me? So if I'm governor, this is how the conversation goes with the power company. This is not a negotiation, and this is not a conversation. I'm going to do the talking, you're going to do the listening, and then you're going to give me an answer. If you want to sell power to the people of South Carolina, I think that's wonderful. We need our lights to come on. We need our computers to come on. So this is how it works. You're going to agree right now today to sell power within this narrowly prescribed window of pricing, because that's the fair market value of the services that you offer, or you're not selling power to the people of South Carolina. You know, that commercial, when banks compete, we win. Well, when power companies compete, we win. But that's not what happens in South Carolina. And then to add insult to injury, what this establishment's been doing is they call the bill the Rate Stabilization Act. So when we pick up the paper, we think, oh gosh, they're doing something to benefit we the people. It's going to stabilize my rates, because everybody's worried about their power bill. It's the second largest expense on anybody's monthly bills, right? Governor McMaster, okay, and one of the things about my campaign is I'm not going to name names because it's the substance of these issues that have to control and have to get fixed. But when he signs it into law, he and Pam Everett are sitting there at the signing ceremony, and he says, we are on a roll in South Carolina. Now, we are on a roll. It's a great day in South Carolina. So people pick up the paper and they think, we the people are on a roll. No, 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 no. The power company's on a roll. It's a great day for the power company. I don't know anybody in South Carolina who's excited about their power bill going up without the for-profit going through the Public Service Commission, having transparency, having public comment before they jack up your power bills.
Well, I think that this also, this ties back into the broader spending issue, right? So what you have going on is you have a legislature who's trying to increase their tax revenue, obviously. And then what do they do as a result of that? They start recruiting these kind of data centers and things of the like to come to our state, right? So the data centers come in, they require a lot of power. They use a lot of power. And
water.
Exactly. And the question is, how are they going to pay for that? And initially in our energy proposal, there were protections for ratepayers to ensure that, the increased capacity needed would be paid for by the data center. But this was taken out and then reinserted and then taken out, and then the final version is not in there. So how would we protect South Carolinians in this situation from experiencing a huge hike in their bill just because of these data centers coming to the state?
Yeah, so that's a really good point. And so when I say South Carolina is under attack, we are under attack. One of the ways we're under attack is our water is being stolen and our power is being taken from us through these data centers. And so I'm not a big fan of government bureaucracy. In fact, I can't stand bureaucracy. I like accountability, transparency. But I am in favor of common sense regulation. And so what's happening right now is these data centers are getting built and nobody's paying attention to where they go. You follow me? And why they come in here? They want our water supply because you got to keep the computers cool, and they want our electricity. Well, as our power supply exists right now in South Carolina, if we just open our doors to these data centers, then when we turn those lights on, they don't come on. We turn our spigot on and the water doesn't come out. In South Carolina, we don't really think about water rights because we've been so blessed. You go to California, I'm not a proponent of California politics, don't get me wrong, but in the West, water rights are one of the most important issues of any day. South Carolina, we've been blessed, but what I'm trying to let people know is we're under attack. And if we don't wake up and we don't protect ourselves, then our water is no longer going to be there and our electricity is never going to be there. Now, Sandy Cooper, I could talk to you for days about this one, okay? And let me tell you why, all right? So my grandfather was, if I'm elected governor, I'll be the fourth generation public servant of South Carolina in my family, okay? I am not a politician. I don't have a political bone in my body, okay? And there's a big difference between a politician and a public servant. A politician cares about one thing, re-election. That's all he or she cares about, okay? A public servant has one motivation, to serve the people whom they represent. And to prove I'm bipartisan, there's a gentleman named Chip Campson who serves in the state Senate. We probably disagree on a lot of stuff politically, but you know what? Chip Campson is a public servant because I know Chip. I know he's a man of faith. So even if we disagree on things, I respect him so much because he is approaching every issue from a substantive standpoint and as a public servant. The problem is we don't have many Chip Campsons in the legislature. We got a bunch of politicians. So Sandy Cooper, my grandfather, basically wrote the enabling statute with his law partner, who was Dick Jeffries, who was president pro tem of the Senate for a long time, who was governor of South Carolina. And Sandy Cooper's original mission was a great and important mission. Bring power to rural South Carolina, be an engine for economic growth, and watch this. The money that you generate for the sale of power to the people of South Carolina, you use those funds to offset the people's tax liability. Pretty good mission and purpose, right? Well, that ain't what Sandy Cooper's doing now. I think it's in 2005, the legislature, this established and passed a law that the most that Sandy Cooper can pay into the general fund to reduce our tax burden is 1%. Why would a state of South Carolina ever reduce its own ability to reduce the tax burden of its own people? That is just corrupt in all capital letters. If you live in Alaska, they own natural resources, generate revenue, and guess what? They get a dividend check. You think the state of South Carolina's ever given a citizen a dividend check? For God's sakes, hell no. And that is because of corruption. And so Sandy Cooper, and I'll show you right here, Sandy Cooper, we all know what happened to VC Summer, right? They took $3.9 billion and they literally basically caught it on fire. If you go to VC Summer 2 and 3 right now, it looks like a crime scene, okay? So in May 2013, they did a new coordination agreement, okay? And this is what happened. The co-ops are 100% basically of the Sandy Cooper customer base, okay? The way it exists now is Sandy Cooper has rural South Carolina in handcuffs. They're required by this contract to purchase their power from Sandy Cooper, okay? VC Summer happens. Wall Street says, guys, you're not selling any more bonds to these little old ladies because y'all have screwed the pooch at VC Summer. And because your contract with the co-ops is getting ready to expire, which means your customer base is going to be gone. You follow me? So your days are numbered. That's what Wall Street told Sandy Cooper. So Sandy Cooper knows they are in a jam of all jams, okay? The co-ops have their own transmission lines. All they need is somebody to generate the juice to put on their transmission lines to deliver to my farm in Williamsburg County, okay? So the co-ops have all the power in the world. In page 24 of this amended agreement, number one, the co-ops agreed to leave these handcuffs on, I think another 30 years. You know what else the co-ops agreed to do? To allow $3.9 billion to be passed off to 2 million innocent people. See, when you build a power plant, it's okay to pass off a fraction of that cost to the customer if you're giving them a benefit, the juice. What is not okay is we get no benefit from VC Summer 2 and 3. It looks like a crime scene, but we're going to have to $3.9 billion in costs. That's direct economic harm. And do you know who did the bidding for the co-ops? I'm not going to name names. A former general counsel and CEO of Sandy Cooper, who every month, when he was negotiating this deal on behalf of co-ops, guess where he was getting a check from? Sandy Cooper. Guys, it's really bad. And nobody has been willing to step forward and speak the truth in this state, and I'm willing to do it. Now, I knew when I announced I was going to go through the equivalent of political hell on earth, which I have gone through. But trust me, I know how this story ends, guys. I know what the truth is, and it's going to be told. And 15 months from now, the people of South Carolina are going to look at me not as some guy that got arrested. They're going to look at me as the cure to a cancer of corruption that is causing direct economic harm that has got to stop.
Well, thank you for that answer. We're going to be moving into an area you are duly familiar with. legal and regulatory reform. All right. So, Mullins, last session, I'm sure you were paying close attention. The legislature passed a proposal on lawsuit reform, also known as tort reform, related to liquor liability. What is your position on reforming South Carolina's joint and several liquor liability? Are you in favor of moving to a strict several liability system? And what are your thoughts on other sort of facets within the tort reform arena, like medical malpractice and the causal chain, et cetera?
Yeah. So on the liquor liability, the way that the system has worked is that if you sell alcohol for money, and you are found partly responsible, if you're at least one part responsible, then you have to pick up the tab for all the damages that have been legally caused by the harm. Okay. I'm not in favor of that. The reason is because I don't think it's fair, even though they sell alcohol for money, I don't think it's fair to treat one for-profit defendant differently than other for-profit defendants. You follow me? So bars and restaurants, as a defendant, as a potential wrongdoer, should be treated exactly the same as other for-profit wrongdoers. Does that make sense? So I'm not in favor of it. But let me tell you what's going on with this tort reform and with these judges, okay? Here's something that nobody has said in South Carolina, and that is the truth. The way that we elect judges in South Carolina is one of the purest forms of democracy that exists on earth. Here's why. Number one, our judges are elected by the people, albeit through their elected officials in the General Assembly. Number two, they are subject to recall. There's no such thing as a rogue judge. There's no such thing as an extreme state court judge in South Carolina, because if they get off track, they have to go back through screening, and they're going to basically be recalled by the people through their elected members of the General Assembly. And thirdly, most importantly, do you know how much money it costs to be a circuit court judge in South Carolina?
No.
You just got to put gas in your car. Now, you know who does not like the fact that money has no impact in becoming a judge in South Carolina? The dark money. See, you cannot corrupt a system of electing judges that doesn't rely on or need money. So when you hear Alan Wilson, when you hear Pam Everett, Ralph Norman, and Nancy Mace talk about popular elections for judges, let me tell you exactly where that's coming from. That's coming from the dark money, because they want to have direct access to our judges, because once they have direct access to our judges, they can buy them. They're trying to buy the third branch of government, and I am absolutely opposed to it.
So another school of thought, other than the JMSC, which we currently have right now in South Carolina, is the federal model. As the governor elected by the entire state of South Carolina, do you think that you or a governor, from years past or going forward, should have the ability to nominate a singular judge for a singular seat with the advising consent of the Senate through the Senate Judiciary and then the election of the Senate? Do you think that model is pure as is currently established?
I'm in favor of looking at any ways to improve the way we elect judges, as long as we don't subject our judges to the dark money. Because when you turn judges into politicians, right, it's over, guys. And here's what the criticism is of our state court judges. The criticism is, well, they let the cases go to the jury. Well, that should never be a criticism. They are allowing the people of South Carolina to resolve their own disputes. See, what the insurance industry wants is they want to rig the deal, the laws, to favor their own financial needs, and then they want to put the judge on the bench who puts his or her thumb on the scale. Our state court judges in South Carolina are good. They are servants. I mean, I know a lot of them. It's not because I know them personally, it's because I appear before them. Where we run into risk is our federal judges who have lifetime appointment. And, there are constraints I have, as a lawyer. I wish that those could be removed so I could speak up and speak out about things I've seen in my career. But when you give a judge a lifetime appointment, unfortunately, it's not always good. It's good to have our judges to be accountable to the will of the people, and our state court process allows that, which is a good thing.
To just add on that, specifically on the magistrate side, right? I think that's an issue, the way that we currently do it. This is an issue because what you have is tons of judges across the state on what's called holdover status, where essentially the senator, whenever they decide, they can get rid of that magistrate judge. And I think that adds to the problem, right? And I think that a lot of people look at the way that we currently pick our judges and they say, like, why does the legislature have such a heavy hand in this process, right? Now, I tend to agree with you a little bit. I think that, directly electing judges, that brings a lot of other areas into play here. Right. But I think a federal model, it keeps the judiciary independent and out of both direct legislature control and also not subject to political whims of how an election would go.
And look, and I understand the question, and I recognize this is going to be a long conversation for me to have with the people of South Carolina because nobody's approached it from, honestly, what I believe is the truthful way. Theoretically, the federal system does promote independence, but what we've seen is it also promotes rogue and extreme judges that are subject to persuasion, and they rule in certain ways without fear of recall. You follow me? Our state court judges do not get off track because they know that they're going to have to answer to the people of South Carolina, albeit through the members of the General Assembly. I mean, so the fact that they're rescreened, like my Uncle Payton was in the Senate when they passed this law, and I remember him telling me, he's no longer with us, but I remember him telling me, growing up, I asked him, I said, well, once you become a judge, I mean, why do you have to go back through screening? And he said, it's the way to make sure that people on the bench are serving the interest of the people. There has to be some accountability and some ability to recall, because if a judge goes way off track one way, whether it's to the left or to the right, then that's a risk to the people at large. And that's a risk that you can design out by the way you select the judges. And the most important thing is that in the insurance industry and the dark money, they hate the fact that the Chief Justice of our state Supreme Court does not need money to become a Chief Justice. They hate that. Now, they're never going to say that. These establishment candidates are never going to come out and say that. But trust me, that's what's going on behind closed doors that the people don't see. They want the access to the judges so their dark money can buy them and so they can influence them. And I will fight tooth and nail. I will debate with anybody on this earth. We can never allow that to happen because the people's power will be taken from them.
So moving off of the legal side and more onto the regulatory side, and this is going to strike a nerve with you because you just went through it, as did I on our collective drives up from Charleston today. So spending on roads in South Carolina has continued to increase. We've talked about this a little bit in the interview so far, but residents say they still haven't seen the results of the higher spending. How would you implement policy changes at SCDOT and the road repair process to ensure residents see improvements in the quality of the infrastructure? And just to give you some data points here, we ran a poll, 1,200 South Carolina registered voters in January, 46%, which I thought was a little low, to be honest with you, rated the state's roads and highways as poor or very poor. And I'm sure, as you know, South Carolina, the state controls the lion's share of roads in our state per capita compared to other states. So we have a very centralized command structure with DOT. So with all that being said, it's a huge issue. Everyone's talking about it. It's a bipartisan issue. How would you go about restructuring it?
Yep. And the reason why I think it's so important is when I say this failed, broken, and corrupt system is causing direct economic harm to we the people, our roads is one way. So the most valuable thing that any of us have on this side of the soil is our time. Right? It's the most valuable commodity we have. Well, there are people that are spending an hour and a half in traffic one way to work every day. And they're not being paid for that time because most of them are getting paid by the hour. And so this congestion and bottleneck is robbing them of their time on this earth. Nobody wants to be stuck in traffic. Another way it causes direct economic harm is the longer you're in traffic, the more your car or your truck's running, the more money you spend on gas. Another way that it's causing direct economic harm is tearing up the front end of our cars or our trucks that we then have to go and fix. And so I'm surprised by the 46%, and it's probably because people in South Carolina, I'm not faulting them, but they don't know any different. All they know is there's a road. You follow me? They don't know any different. Like in rural South Carolina, I mean, like my farm's in Williamsburg County, there's a road. At some point in this campaign, I'm going to put a bobblehead on my truck and I'm going to drive down the road and show it to people. It must get the last dollar of the DOT budget. That road was smoother in horse and buggy days. I mean, like literally. And there are lots of roads like that all through rural South Carolina. I mean, as a friend of mine that is a big road contractor in North Carolina, he told me, he said, in South Carolina, you go from good to SHI in a hurry.
Yeah.
Well, that's not a good thing. And so what I think one of the main problems is just like Sam mentioned earlier about redundancy. The DOT has so much politics and so much redundancy, and there doesn't seem to be clear leadership. There doesn't seem to be a clear plan. My guess is, and I'm going to go back and look at some more studies, but my guess is if I research right now, what I would find out is we're about 15 years behind where we need to be as far as infrastructure.
25.
25. See, it's worse than I thought. I mean, you're a quarter century behind, and you've raised taxes for basically, 2012, 2017.
It's not a money shortfall that's the issue.
Right now, the DOT's sitting on $2 billion budget.
Exactly.
No, not budget, surplus. So they just got $2 billion laying around. I don't know if they got it in croaker sacks and they sit around and they smoke cigars and have drinks, but I mean, that's crazy.
Well, and the rate of the state population growth, especially post-COVID, bringing more industry is showing up in South Carolina. So that is a relatively new, issue that we're facing that I know that the ad hoc committee that Speaker Smith's put together is trying to get ahead of right now outside of session, and we commend them for that, at least, taking this head on and really commend them for that work. But you're right, we have a long way to go on infrastructure, and, hopefully my kids can never know how it was back in our day.
And one thing I want to study is light speed rail. Okay. Right. So, just like driving up here today. So I'm driving up 26 and we've got 2 lanes heading west, 2 lanes headed east. And you've got however many feet of pretty grass median in between. Well, why don't we build high speed rail, right? The train goes right, is 10 feet above the ground, and you get on it, and it takes you from Charleston to Greenville in 25 minutes. And it doesn't impact any of the 4 lanes we have. It takes congestion off the highway and puts it on the light speed rail. Another thing that I think we should look at in South Carolina is these 18-wheelers are tearing up our roads. And I don't have anything against 18-wheelers. Okay, the trucking industry is an important industry in our state. It's how commerce moves, and we've got to have it. But why don't we look at a system where we pave 2 lanes of the interstate that belong just to the trucks and help and get the trucking industry to help pay for those 2 lanes, and those 2 lanes are theirs. You follow me? I don't even know why we really need the weigh stations. I mean, maybe we do, somebody can convince me, but look, guys, this is your 2 lanes, run it. You follow me? Get off the interstate, because it's not the Honda Accords tearing up the interstate. It's these 18-wheelers. Right. And what makes me really nervous, like on the way up here, where my chest gets really tight, is when the 18-wheeler is right here, literally about 9 inches away from my truck, and I got a concrete barrier right there. There's nothing safe about that.
Right.
There's just nothing safe about it. So anyway.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, it's a monumental task in front of all of South Carolinians, and it's on all of our minds. And one last thing on the infrastructure, we have I-73, I believe it is, going from Florence on 95 to Myrtle Beach, which is getting ready to be constructed. Myrtle Beach is going to continue to boom with that direct access point, especially for tourism. Would you be in favor of tolling that road and having it basically be a consumption tax based on probably a lot of out-of-towners who are using it?
I'm not willing to rule it out. Mm-hmm. I mean, we've got to provide a direct route from 95 to Myrtle Beach.
Right.
I went to college at Wofford, and my mother lived in Pawleys Island, and I had a Jeep. It was a Jeep Wrangler, is a 4-stroke. It was 4-wheel drive, okay, but it was a 4-stroke without air conditioner. Well, let me tell you something. Making it from Spartanburg to Pawleys in a 4-cylinder Jeep, that's a long haul, boys.
Yeah.
There is no easy way to get there, right? But that coast is one of our most precious, valuable assets in the state. And so the whole state benefits from having a direct route from something like 95 to our coast. That benefits all of us. Right. And so I'm willing to look at a toll road, whatever we need to do to make it happen, because it needs to happen.
Mullins, we're going to get into our last section. 2 more questions, and it's going to be about education. Obviously, a very important topic to every South Carolinian, especially parents like us and Sam, who has a new baby. So Sam, kick us off.
Yeah, so the first one here is, what role do you think parents should have in shaping their child's education, and how do you think you could protect that role? And, would that involve supporting something like a parental bill of rights to, like keep politics out of the classroom one way or the other, and just strictly education be the focus? Or how do you view a parent's role in education?
A parent's role is to be a parent. I mean, that's a parent's role. And I think, it's a slippery slope when the government gets inside a person's home and tries to tell them what they should or should not do. Okay. And what I think the main problem is in South Carolina is these politicians go to these cocktail parties, right? And the people say, I hate the fact that I've got to pay for public education and these taxes because my kids go to private school. And then what do the politicians do? They see political opportunity and they say, oh yeah, you shouldn't have to do that. And they fan that flame. And they say, we need to have vouchers, private vouchers. And then the donor says, yeah, man, we need private vouchers. And the politician says, yeah, and he keeps fanning that flame, or she keeps fanning that flame, right? A public servant has the same conversation with the same person at the same cocktail party and says, look, man, here's the bottom line. Our Constitution, I believe is Section 3, says that our birth certificate says that we are going to have quality public education in this state. I don't care where your kids go to school. And Section 4 says that you are prohibited to use public money for a religious or private educational purpose. So that which you want me to do, I can't do. The light is red. That's what servant leadership is. Another thing servant leadership is that I tell you what though, if it's the will of the people that we have private vouchers, there is a legal mechanism to do that, and that is a constitutional referendum. And I'm never for any constitutional referendums. I always want to know what the will of the people is. You follow me? But what do politicians do? They fan its flame. They try to divide us, people with means versus people without means, and it's corrupt. The reality of it is we're all in this together. We all want the same things. My children go to private school. And guess what? I will be the most pro-public school governor this state has ever seen. You know why? It ain't about my kids.
Well, I think that, for a kid who's maybe stuck in a school system that's not working for them, sometimes this is the only lifeline they have, and if they're stuck in a school and their parents can't afford to send them to private school, a voucher program or an ESA or a tax credit scholarship, this kind of levels the playing field and gives them some opportunity to have a chance to succeed in education.
So quality public education is key to anybody earning economic freedom. And having a quality public education is key to having an educated workforce. Here's where I disagree a little bit. The solution is we've got to do something in South Carolina we've never done before. Invest in our public school teachers. Last legislative session, what the politicians did to solve the problem of the teacher shortage in our state? They passed a law that said that you no longer have to be certified to teach. Well, number one, that doesn't solve the problem of the teacher shortage.
Well, they increased teacher pay too, to be fair.
$1,500. And at the same time, the legislature gave themselves an $18,000 unconstitutional pay raise. Those two votes right there in last session tells you everything you need to know about the corruption in Columbia. When I'm governor, public school teachers are going to make between $85,000 and $100,000 a year. I don't want to hear it. $45 billion comes in. That's how we're going to spend the money, folks. You know why we don't do that? We have new schools in South Carolina because some dude made money building that school. But in the same school, the teachers are woefully underpaid and are having to reach into their own pocket to buy school supplies. You know why we don't pay our teachers? Because these crooks haven't figured out a way to make money off the teacher salary. That's what's happening.
I have a quick question for you regarding sort of open enrollments. We talked earlier about the power companies, competing more, obviously more competition in an open market, free market creates a better product. Do you think, to Sam's point, if you have a school that is objectively failing, that a child, and then this does exist in this state, we all know it, where there are children who are not in a situation to succeed, their parents are involved, they're saying, my gosh, I wish there was a way out. Do you think that an open enrollment policy, even if you geographically sphered it somehow, where the schools now had to compete and there was some sort of state dollar tied to that, that would be, I don't know, beneficial to the overall economic ecosystem within the state of South Carolina?
Well, what I'm in favor of, every child should have access to a quality public education. So I guess then the question becomes, what is access? Is that the school closest to you, or is that a school that's 25 miles away? I'm willing to consider anything in the short run to give children access to a quality public education. Our long-term objective in South Carolina is to ensure that children don't have to go anywhere to get a quality public education. And guys, we put a man on the moon like a long time ago. We can do this. You just have to get the politicians out of the way and have servant leaders invest in our school teachers and watch the water level rise. I'll bet you, if you did a poll of school teachers and you say, I'm gonna give you two options here. One, you can have a tent, right? And you can have desks and all the school resources, supplies you need, okay? Or you can have a brand new school with no resources within the school. Which door are you gonna pick? I'll bet you my dollars to your donuts that they're gonna pick the tent, because it's all about the one-on-one teacher-to-student relationship. That's where the magic is. That's where the magic is. It's not in the building, the shiny object that you can see from the interstate. It's the teachers that matter. And the same thing with with a higher education. So anyway, that's just, I think, to me, what makes South Carolina great are the people one of the things that makes South Carolina great is that people get up every day and go to work. And we've got to invest in value and show those people respect. They've been disrespected for the last 30 years. They have their pockets picked from the time they wake up in the morning to the time they go to bed. Think about a guy who's got a boat, okay? And the lower head unit is blown out in the boat. And it's gonna cost $3,500 to get repaired. So the boat sits in the backyard on the trailer. What do you think the state gives him a benefit on his tax? Now he gets taxed on the boat and the motor now. He gets his pocket picked on the boat and the motor. He can't afford to get it fixed, but yet he's got to pay the tax every year on the boat and the motor. Doesn't make any sense. They're just picking our pockets every chance they get. They pass a law that would lead us to believe they don't tax our groceries. But you go to the Harris Teeter or Publix, wherever you go, and you look at your grocery bill, I promise you, there are two items at the bottom, at least in Charleston, and they're two different taxes. They're local taxes. Well, guys, local government is state government. They're taxing our groceries. They're just leading us to believe that they're not. When I'm governor, we're going to eliminate all taxes on groceries. And the reason why is, what does buying groceries for your family have to do with state government? Nothing. So then why are they picking our pockets when we buy food for our families? It's just, and these large for-profits get a free ride. Volvo builds a $500 million plant, and they pay zero property taxes. But you got guys all over South Carolina that have John boats, and they get taxed on the boat and the motor. And they get sales tax on the trailer. It's just picking our pockets every which way but loose, and the large for-profits just get a free ride. It's got to stop.
We're getting on our last question for the whole day. Actually, no, you're good. You're good. No, hey.
I can go all day.
Hey, we're the policy council. This is what we do. We love it. We love it.
Give me water, I'll go till midnight.
So graduation rates in South Carolina are on the rise, but ACT and SAT scores are dogged. They're down. What steps would you take to ensure that graduation rates align with academic achievement? And would a ban on grading floors be on the table? And just to give you some information on this, is Senator Jeff Zell of Sumter introduced Senate Bill 537 to prohibit school districts from requiring teachers to assign a minimum grade or score that exceeds the student's actual performance. Basically, are we pushing kids along here, to the further on in their grades and seeing them fail, even though we're graduating them, not being prepared for the real world?
So graduating kids who are not prepared is not doing them a service whatsoever, okay? One of the problems that I think we have in the public education system is the way the system is geared is it's kind of one size fits all. And the system, the curriculum, is not geared at all towards aptitude, okay? So for example, I believe God gave me a little extra aptitude to see the truth and speak the truth. I'm pretty good at reading comprehension, okay? I am terrible at math. I got a D in probably every science class I ever took. That side of my brain just doesn't work. So I was very blessed to get through the system, right? and able to focus on my aptitude and have a very, very successful law career. I think that one thing we should look at doing is by the eighth grade, we know who our learners are, who our doers are. And by the way, there ain't nothing wrong with a doer, folks. Okay, ain't nothing wrong with a doer. They're just as valuable and just as important as our learners who become our professionals. And so we basically know in the eighth grade. So what I'd like to see is the curriculum in high school be geared more towards their aptitude. So for example, you put the doer on a trade track, you follow me, through high school. So for example, they serve apprentices at local businesses, whether that's construction industry, whether it's welding, whether it's plumbing, whether it's electrical. And so they get up every day and they're getting real world hands-on experience and training from successful private businesses. And the private businesses get the value of having, quite frankly, free labor. But everybody wins, because then when the child graduates from high school, he's had 4 years of on-the-job, real-world training, and he's prepared to be employed. And if we did that, you watch. I bet you a lot of the kids who serve as apprentices, or however we want to call them, end up going to work for the same people, that they did their apprenticeships for. And then we take our learners, people like y'all with the 40-pound brains, and they can go do their thing. I just got lucky to squeak through the system.
You and me both.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. That makes me feel better. Now, I know Sam's a 40-pound.
Sam was an ace.
No, it's only like 30, like not 40.
Well, thanks so much. Germany, actually, I just learned, has a very similar system to that. That's kind of how they do it. They break them out. Literally, I think last week I heard about it. All right, Mullins. Well, is there anything you want to add to the conversation? Is there any points that we missed or that you want to contribute? This is your time.
No, I thank y'all for having me. I thank y'all for the important work that you do. The truth of the matter is that all the problems we face as a state are fixable. And the beauty and the irony of it all is it's fixable for free. Like when I say that I'm the cure to this corruption, it's because the ballot box needs to be viewed as a point of sale, right? And the problem that's happened over the last 30 years is there's no product worth buying. Politics has devolved into all you see is name calling, finger pointing. I mean, look at what's going on in DC right now. Both parties are equally guilty. All they're doing is blaming the other, but yet direct economic harm is being caused to innocent people while they fight. If you hire a servant leader who's there to do the people's bidding all day, every day, then you can have servant leadership for free. And a servant leader spends a lot of time at the policy council. Why? Because I want to know the answers to these questions so we can enact reform and make a difference in people's lives. So what you guys do is a real service to the state, and I thank you. And if I'm governor, you're going to have a friend in me. I'm going to be bugging you all the time. Seriously.
We appreciate that, and we appreciate you being here. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our interview with Democratic candidate for governor, Mullins McLeod. We will see you next time. Thank you.